All right, so let's get started with our video lecture for chapter 14, dealing with the Americas and Oceania in the post-classical era. So we're going to begin with part one, with dealing with North America and the different Native American tribes or American Indian tribes or the Amerindian tribes and societies and cultures that existed in the northern continent. And what we tend to notice is that a common feature is, depending on where they live, the Native American tribes would have developed a culture that adapted to their environment. So, for example, if you were a Plains Indian living in the Central Plains, or the Steppe, or the Great Plains of North America, then you would have hunted buffalo, and you would have lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle focused on hunting buffalo, which would not have been easy because, remember, they didn't have horses, so they couldn't ride up to the buffalo. If you lived in the northernmost, Alaska and Canada part of North America, and you were an Inuit or a Eskimo, as they're commonly referred to, then you would have been hunting, whales and seals and other animals in the Arctic. You would have built your igloos and wore these heavy furs to keep you warm. If you lived in the Southwest region, right, modern day Arizona and New Mexico, maybe you would have been a Pueblo Indian and you would have built your homes made out of adobe, right? That is reddish clay that was found commonly in the southwestern part. You are the Anasazi, or the cave people, where they built their homes, they carved it out of on the sides of caves and the sides of cliffs. They also lived in southwest United States. In the eastern part of the United States, the Atlantic region, you probably were the Iroquois, right? They would have lived in the forests of the eastern half of the United States. So they would have a lot of trees, right? So you see a lot of like log cabins. They would have done hunting in the forest. They would have done a lot of farming as well. So my point is that there's different societies and cultures and tribes based on the environment that they lived in. Now, regardless of which one we're looking at, the general consensus is that whether they were hunter-gatherers or whether they had some agriculture, there wasn't enough food surplus to have a massive population growth. Right, especially when you compare the same time period with the Chinese or the Indians, who are going to have this explosion in population. So because some of them were still hunter-gatherers, and because agriculture was even if it was present, it wasn't as productive. Partly because they don't have tools, like metal tools out of iron or steel, and that would limit the efficiency of the agriculture, how much land they can cultivate. So no food surplus means less population growth. That also means that there's not going to be urbanization. So you're not going to have huge cities in North America. There's not going to be labor specialization either. Right? Most people are going to be farmers or hunters or gatherers, right? Food producers. You're not going to have that much merchants. You're not going to have that much producers like artisans and craftspeople. When it comes to their culture in North America, we identify that the people in North America, they were animists, right? They believed in the spirit world. They worshipped their ancestors. They believed in shamans, having a special connection to the spirit world. And this is a similar religion that we see in sub-Saharan Africa. We also see it in the Central Asian steppe, like the Mongols. Like the Africans, the people in North America, they were matrilineal, right? This is one of the few other places that matrilineal was common, right? And that means your ancestry is passed on from your mother's side. When it comes to gender roles, we see that women have a lot of rights, or status, I should say, gender status. And therefore, this was a less patriarchal society. So women can choose to remarry, can choose to have a divorce. They can choose who they want to marry as their partner. Now, within North America, there's one culture that tends to stand out, and that is the culture of the Mississippians. And of course, these are the people who lived along the Mississippi River Valley. And they're often called the mound builders because they build these huge earthen mounds, right, made out of, dirt and stone and grass. And so sometimes they're called the mound builders, and then here you see in this illustration that these mounds had a religious importance because it was a burial mound, right? So they would bury the bodies of their leaders, their kings, and that sort of stuff. Sometimes the mounds were very simplistic, like what would look like a hill, right? But these are man-made. Sometimes they were more advanced, more interesting, right? It's like this one, you see it, if you follow the shape, it kind of looks like the shape of a snake or a serpent. And here we see another angle of it. So these are these are the mound builders, the Mississippians. And a lot of these relics, a lot of these things are, these mounds are still found in the United States in different parts. Now the mound builders, the Mississippians, right, they had a rigid class structure with the priests and the nobles in the upper class. And they did practice slavery, and these slaves were results of war. Now, the largest city in what is now the United States was a city called Cahokia. All right, Cahokia is in the central part of the United States. I think it's Ohio, and it had a large population for its time, a large population in North America, and because it's on the river. And it's kind of like the center of these different rivers that kind of crisscross each other. They're going to be a trade center. So they're going to grow in importance and trade. So there's going to be some trade in North America, and it's going to be far-reaching, like widespread, all right, so from one end of North America to another. And Cahokia will be like this, center, this urban center that grew from, a whole bunch of smaller towns. Now, when we look at trade, understand that even though these trade networks ran from one end, like you could trade stuff from Alaska all the way up here to Florida, right? Cahokia being right here in the middle. You had places, on the Pacific. You have places on the Atlantic, right? And all of these trade networks, could link into Mexico, or where the Aztecs would be. But even though these trade networks were up and running, and they were possible, they were very, very minimal when it came to the volume or the amount of trade, especially when you compare it to what we see in the Eastern Hemisphere, right? In Africa, Europe, and Asia, where we have all these major trade networks like Trans-Saharan and the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean trade networks, right? These are all massive trade networks, a lot of stuff and people, going back and forth. But in North America and in South America, it's minimum, right? The Americas are going to be trading very minimum, even though, again, it's long distance, but it's minimum in the amount. And this is the other thing we also identified is that the Americas and Oceania, which, is of course all these islands out here in the Pacific, that they're going to be isolated, right? So all the knowledge and trade and information that's being diffused from China to the Muslims to the Africans to the Europeans and back and forth, none of that is going to reach. None of those advancements are going to reach the Americas. So the civilizations and the societies of the Eastern Hemisphere are going to improve and get technologically better and better and better, while the societies in the Americas are going to pretty much stay in the Stone Age, right, all the way until the end of this time period in the 1450s. Now, of all throughout the post-classical era, the main, most active trading people are going to be the Aztecs. And that's going to be impressive because, remember, the Aztecs, they don't have metal tools. They don't have wheeled vehicles like, carriages and wagons and carts. And they're not going to have any large labor animals. So that means all the trade that they did was people walking and carrying stuff, right? And they would trade in luxury goods, as anywhere else. They would trade in luxury goods. But their luxury goods isn't the silk and the spices and, cotton and stuff like that. It's going to be stuff like cacao and feathers and shells and rubber balls. But it is luxury goods, right? Because these aren't things you really need. It's things that you actually just want. The Incas in South America, they're going to have some long distance trade, but nowhere near as much activity as the Aztecs. And the main reason is because they're on top of the mountains. They're on top of the Andes Mountains, and that makes it very difficult. If you're climbing up a mountain, it's pretty hard to be carrying goods when you're going up and down a mountain. So in the Incas, we're going to see that there's not going to have that many merchants. The Aztecs are going to have a whole bunch of merchants, but the Incas are not. And long distance trade was controlled by the government, right? So everything that was exported, everything was imported, was in private, like businesses or companies or merchants. It was controlled by the Inca government. So again, North American trade, although it existed within the region of North America, it was very, very minimum, right? And what did exist tended to be near the waterways, right? So they would put canoes on the Mississippi River, or the Ohio River, or the Erie, or the Great Lakes, and stuff like that. And so, waterways was the main way they transported. But we don't see oceanic, transport. We don't see, maritime transport or trade like we would see in East Asia. Same thing for the Pacific, for Oceania. So even though the people that settled these islands, they migrated across Oceania little by little over the last 1,000, 2,000 years. And they settled all these tiny little islands and spread their culture there.
Good afternoon, Coral Park.
We're not going to see much more. We're not going to see a lot of trade. And it makes sense because it's, trading across the Pacific Ocean. So the ocean is going to be a blocker of trade in the Pacific Ocean, right, in Oceania.
Seniors, please check the diploma name list that is posted on the bulletin.
And finally, we do see culture and crops. Cultures and crops like sweet potatoes, animals like pigs. They would be transported across the Pacific Ocean, all over Oceania.
Teachers and students, listen up.
All right, so we're going to stop here for part 1. We're going to talk about the Aztecs next in part 2. And I'm going to go ahead and keep the video playing so you can get the last minutes while the announcements are still going on.
Congratulations on the victories of both JV and varsity boys basketball teams over Terra. Thank you, Rams, and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Friday.
Good job, Jonathan. Your team won. You beat Terra. Not bad. Not bad. Pretty good. I know, right? I bet they're probably going to wait until like January to do these homeworks. And they're not going to start now. They're going to wait till like January 5th to do the homework for the Native Americas. And they'll be like, oh, we don't have time to study for the exam. Oh, the exam is worth 1,000,000 grades and I don't have time to study. Oh, well. They got to stay on task. What do you want me to say? They got to stay on task.